Good afternoon, everybody. It's Kevin James here, CEO of GCX. I want to extend a warm welcome to all of you at this podcast, part of our Beyond Sustainability podcast series. Today we're dealing on the subject of zero waste to landfill, and with me is my friend and guest and business partner, strategic business partner, Hein Fourie, Managing Director of Zero Waste Technologies, a company that with ourselves is focused on assisting and supporting our clients on a roadmap and pathway to zero waste to landfill. Welcome, Hein.
Thank you.
I think just to start off with, where the journey we have walked so far, since 2014, GCX started GCX Zero Waste, which was a business unit where Hein worked with us to provide our clients with an idea of what they could do in terms of diverting waste from landfill. And that journey has gone on until 2019, where Zero Waste Technology was born, and that's the organization that Hein now manages and with whom GCX engages in a strategic fashion to help our clients, as I mentioned, towards a more sustainable, more responsible way of dealing with waste. Maybe, Hein, if I could just ask you to introduce yourself and give the guests a little bit of background in terms of your experience and where you've come from.
Thank you, Kevin. Hein Fourie, as you said, the Managing Director of Zero Waste Technologies, chemical engineer by qualification, and have been working in the waste management space for probably close to 24 years now. So, it's been an interesting journey, and I've learned quite a lot about, different sectors. The work that I've done is from healthcare to food and beverage to property. So I've been exposed to quite a range of different sectors, businesses, how they operate, but also learned as to, innovation and key aspects of waste management that improve the overall diversion from landfill and be able for companies to become more sustainable through that.
I suppose one of the things that's on a lot of our clients' mind is, what are the drivers for wanting to embark on a zero waste to landfill journey? At the moment, the default way of disposing of waste is in a landfill. We know that it's environmentally not an ideal way to dispose of waste. We know that seeking alternatives is difficult and more expensive, maybe. Tell us a little bit, if you don't mind, Hein, about where we are, the current state of waste management in South Africa. Okay, so a lot of our clients want to do this. They don't want to pay more than they're paying. Why should they? Let's start at risk. What are the risks of not diverting your waste from landfill?
I think that's, for me, the easiest to quantify. Is that we facing a crisis in South Africa, just as we faced the load shedding, electricity crisis, and the water. I think day zero is still fresh in my mind, at least, because everybody got a fright when there was almost no water left. And what we've got now is a crisis that's sort of crawling up behind us and creeping up, and nobody's noticing it, but we reaching the proverbial day gat vol, which is your trademark. You coined that phrase. But day gat vol is literally when all the holes, landfills, are full, and we need to find alternative places to store that waste. Now, the big problem of that is where. So it's one thing about managing it and saying, yes, we have to build new landfills, but where are we going to build those new landfills? Everywhere but except my backyard is usually the thing. Everybody's like, yes, let's build a new landfill, but nobody wants it in their backyard. And that goes for everybody in the population, is they want it, but they don't want it in their backyard, in somebody else's backyard. And the problem is that in order to get spaces, to license them, is quite a lengthy process. It typically takes about 6-7 years from when you want to start a landfill or had the idea that you need a landfill until it's operational. 6-7 years is a long time period if there's no waste collections for such a period. And I think that's the biggest risk for companies that is relying on landfill, is that one of the stats is that half of the city of Johannesburg's landfills will be full by the end of 2025. So that is half of it, and then that they only have 2 years left. So it basically means that in 2 years, all the landfills will be full in the city of Johannesburg, which is probably the biggest city in terms of waste volume generation, and probably also where most of the businesses are located. So just imagine that. In 2 years' time, all the landfills are going to be full. And it typically takes 6 years to build a new one, which is not going to be as close located as the current ones. So you will have to, there's going to be a significant increase in cost, because building a new landfill, there's an increase in cost. Property or land is more expensive. So purchasing that land, lining the landfill site properly is also more expensive. So it is what the municipalities currently charge versus what they're going to be charging in the future for new landfill is probably going to be double in terms of Johannesburg. So it's double price. And then you're going to travel longer distances. And transport is typically between 40 and 60% of your total waste management cost. Let's call it half. So half of your cost is going to be increased due to traveling distance, and then the other half is going to double in price. So it's going to have a significant impact on companies that's currently choosing the cheaper option to landfill, but in the very short nearby future, it's going to cost them a significant amount.
So we're not, in 2 years' time in Johannesburg, and I know there are other metros as well that are going to be impacted in the same way. Okay, I think eThekwini is another one that's always at Tshwane. Tshwane is another one. So we might not see business continuity risk coming to play, i.e. where stuff is literally not being collected with nowhere to go. What we will see is a significant commercial risk to companies, where if they're paying 5,000 Rand a month at the moment for waste disposal, it could literally double.
I think that we will see that it will double in the period of 2 to 3 years. But I also want to say that it's difficult to look into the future and predict what is actually going to happen. But I think that there is going to be disruptions as well. If you just think about the status quo, there's a certain amount of collection vehicles that travel a certain distance. It's a business model that's been built over many years, and they understand those logistic models really well. Suddenly, when the landfill space has run out, your current logistic fleet is not sufficient enough to actually absorb that. You will also have landfills that's located outside of the normal proximity of where the waste is generated, transporting it further, but now you've got several regions going to the same place, which is going to create a bottleneck at the gates going in. So I think there's literally going to be a constraint on the offtake and feeding it into the landfill. So I think that there is actually going to be in certain areas business interruption where your waste physically is not going to be collected. That's there's a physical constraint, but then secondly is which businesses will be able to afford. You mentioned 5,000, but I'm thinking more about the company that's currently paying 50,000. That's going to jump up to 100,000 rand a month.
Well, we've seen the cost of electricity go from like 680% since 2007. We haven't seen that with gate fees into landfills. And I think that's part of the problem, right? There hasn't been enough of an incentive for companies to seek out alternative ways of disposing of waste because it is so cheap. Not so much in the Western Cape because it is more expensive. They have realized that supply and demand and with airspace in landfills, becoming less and less, that the price has to go up. That's how the economics work. But in other parts of the country, they haven't seen that. They've just sort of, if anything, increasing it by consumer price index, but it should be, probably mirroring what electricity is doing, right? Because it should be by double digits every year. So because of that, the economics for seeking alternatives, it's just not very motivating, right? What do you think in Johannesburg, what is the current gate fee for a landfill?
So it's probably close to 280, 300 rand a ton. I'm standing under correction, but
what should it
probably
be?
It should be above 600.
600.
Yeah. And that's what the City of Cape Town and the Western Cape governments have done quite well, is that they've started increasing the rate or the gate fee for landfill to actually what the true cost, they call it the true cost of waste disposal is. So what they're doing is that they charging not what it costs to run the landfill, but what it will cost to establish a new landfill and maintain the same level of airspace, because you have to have that contingency of providing sufficient airspace. And that is, I think the City of Cape Town's rate is around about 650 per ton, and that's what the rate should be. And what happens, sorry for interrupting you, but what it then happens is that because your rate is now almost doubled compared to what Gauteng is, it actually stimulates the market in saying, but hang on, we can start doing something that's cheaper than landfill, and we can take that risk because there is a cost benefit of diverting waste and taking it through an alternative process.
Which is why in the Western Cape we see a much bigger options around alternatives to landfill, is because the actual business case is better, because the baseline cost of 600 rand a ton for a gate fee allows you to seek out other options. But when it's 300 rand a ton, you're not very motivated to look for other options because nothing will come close, right? So in Johannesburg, what you're saying is that business owners in Johannesburg is actually not going to be double. It could be as much as 4 times because they're already underpaying by 50%.
Yes, that's true. They're probably underpaying by 50%, and so the true cost is going to come in. So they're
plus
going
the
to
extra logistics.
Plus the extra logistics, yes.
Okay.
And that's as you said, the alternatives in Cape Town and the surroundings. There's multiple. I think they've got the biggest alternative organic waste solutions in the whole of South Africa. Mostly composting, but I think the black soldier fly process also sprung up. I think it was the starting point for the whole world was here in the Western Cape, and some of it is due to that price benefit that clients get by diverting it. So it's like, okay, we get 10%, we pay 10% less by going through the pain of separating at source and then sending our food waste to an alternative treatment.
Let's talk about recycling, okay? Because for a company to take that first step from sending everything to a municipality, to a landfill, they have an option to contract the services of a waste management company and start separating waste at source to make sure they get value back for that waste, as well as to make sure they can only send as little as possible to the landfill. Tell me a little bit about that process, okay? And tell me about the companies that do this and what what good looks like?
So I think, as you said, traditionally everything was landfilled. It was put in a bin, skip, and taken off. And then there was something happened. I'm not sure exactly when, but something happened, and people started to ask questions. Might have been, if I go back and do the research, it might have been when the city of Cape Town started to do that step change in the increase in the tariffs. But I'm unsure. And people started to say, but hang on, can't I recycle my plastic or cardboard? And it started mostly in the industrial sector. So in the manufacturing sector, where it was almost called pre-consumer sector, where it was clean, large volumes. So cardboard would, be stacked in a large container and then transported to a paper mill, and that made sense. To do that, lower input cost, lower water consumption, lower energy requirements. So that made a lot of sense. And then also, with the volatile oil price, it started to make sense to plastic is basically oil, to include high quality plastics into products that you were manufacturing. So it actually there's a cost benefit, and that sort of, as the industry started doing that, it grew and it became more effective and more cost effective, and then suddenly to a point where almost all packaging is being recovered and mechanically recycled. The difference between mechanical recycling and other types of recycling is probably a discussion for a different day. But mechanical recycling is where they shred the plastic, they heat it up, so they melt it and cool it down and make granules that gets added to new products. But recycled plastic can only be added to about 50% of the total weight of the product that you're making because of quality issues. So paper, glass, metal, plastic is the things that typically gets recycled, and it is plastic that is that doesn't have any contamination. That's really where the food waste comes in. It's really the culprit in all waste management. I think you said, one of the key things is food waste. So yes, people started to do recycling. What they actually did is they kept the recyclables separate. So it's not separation at source in its pure definition, but they kept they kept the cardboard separate, they kept the glass separate, they kept the metal separate, and then the plastics also. But most waste is contaminated, and it's contaminated by food waste. So why most waste, and why probably on average, I would guess if we had a look at, if we took all the data in South Africa of all the companies, organizations, and we had to guess what the percentage of waste is that's being diverted from landfill, it would probably be around 15%. I would say 15, maybe 20. Depends on which sectors, like mining, what do we define as waste? But let's say we talk about general waste. Those are food waste, plastic, cardboard, glass, etc. Those typical waste streams that you get from a office or a restaurant. I would say about 15% is diverted as an average.
So we've got a long way to go, but going back to my question, what does good look like? For a typical office block, what's possible in terms of recycling and diversion from landfill?
By doing nothing downstream, just if you just do good sorting and then send it to industries that's already existing, no new cutting-edge industries, I would say that you are 85%.
Yeah.
85% is achievable.
I tend to agree with that. So offices are actually quite an easy category, right? Because it's the food waste is sort of sporadic. It's like people having lunch in their little kitchens. It's quite easy to keep sorting in the kitchen environment where there's a bit of space. But when you take a look at, for example, shopping malls, okay, we know that's a difficult category, right? Because of the food courts, because of keeping, I suppose, the training of staff, etc., to make sure that there's standard operating procedures to keep things separate. What can we expect in a sort of a usual mall, a enclosed mall?
Excellent would say 70 plus. Good would be probably the average between 50 and 60, which is around 60%.
And then for industrial, obviously you get light industrial, you get this industrial units, and you get heavy industrial where you have big things, which is obviously quite niche and depends on a case-by-case basis. But light industrial, wholesale, like sort of wholesale and distribution, quite an easy category.
Yes. Yeah, because it's consistent.
Yeah.
You know, your waste stream is easily identifiable. It usually consists of wood, plastics, cardboard. So it's easy to do that. Yes, there's some cross-contamination. The typical thing that we see is paint tins and the likes that is there that is not easily recycled or recovered. But yes, again, light industrial distribution per se, that should actually score higher than a office.
Agreed. So let's come back to the Western Cape, where they seem to be leading the way in terms of driving innovation, driving policy, driving the right gate fees that encourage and motivate seeking out alternatives. They introduced in 2022 was the first year, I think, was 50% ban on organics into landfills. I think the second 50% was 2027 coming up now. What spurred this on, and can we expect this kind of policy to be replicated in other parts of South Africa?
Yeah. Well, I don't know what all the reasons is what spurred it, but I do know of a couple, and it sort of makes sense to me. So the first thing is that food waste is a big greenhouse gas emitter. So as soon as it goes into the landfill, it's deprived from oxygen because now you cover it up, and then the anaerobic bacteria starts degrading the food waste. So it converts into methane, which is, what's it now, 25 times more potent than CO2, global warming potential. So that's one of the reasons. The second thing is that it is also food waste is typically high in moisture, so between 80 and 90% water. So think about that. You're putting 80 or 90% water in your landfill. What does that do? That water, as it decomposes, it percolates through the landfill, through all the previous waste, and water is a good solvent, so it picks up all the nasties and it goes and sits in the bottom of the landfill. And with the rain, it starts lifting up. So you now need to manage that soup. That's what I used to do for a living, is I had to clean up that leachate. It's really nasty stuff. And so by removing that food waste, you are reducing the amount of moisture that you're putting in there. So you're reducing that management of that really toxic substance, but then also you're giving more stability to your landfill itself, physical stability. Because food waste, you think about it, if you had to build your house on food waste, or if you had to build your house on rock, it's much more stable. So, or sinking sand, that's probably a good sinking sand versus, and that's what food waste does to a landfill. So what you need to do is you need to bring in a lot of other material, soil, builder's rubble, etc. That actually doesn't need to go into landfill, but you actually use it for stability.
Yep.
And by taking that out, you are saving airspace. And the second thing is food waste consists of a lot of nutrients. I mean, one of the biggest polluters in the world is the fertilizer industry. And all those fertilizers are used to produce food. And the minerals and nutrients that we consume that we don't need needs to go back to the soil. But now we're wasting so much food. I mean, our generation is probably the generation that wastes, I think it's 50%. 50% of all food waste is wasted. And now you're putting it into a hole instead of putting those nutrients back into the soil. So that's the third aspect that makes complete sense to me why you need to do it. And it's a natural process. Composting is so simple, or let me rather say simplistic, compared to other waste management processes.
So actually, the separation and alternative processing of food waste represents a massive opportunity. It's a circular economy opportunity. And obviously you mentioned black soldier fly, which is nutrient recycling, really. It's allowing just using the flies as a catalyst to take what's left of the nutrient from the food and create products with high protein that can then be used to feed animals, etc. Made huge sense. Not easy to scale and to do it on a scale that is required, but certainly has its place. Maybe tell us, how is the waste alternative sector looking in South Africa? Okay, like if we have to just isolate food waste, okay, composting facilities, are there enough? If we've got a ban that's already supposed to be 50% in place, which I don't believe that companies are already diverting 50% of their food waste away from landfills, but the other 50% is imminent in 2027. Are we ready for this total ban on food waste in the Western Cape? And if we are behind in the Western Cape, we're way ahead of the rest of the country. So what does it mean for the rest of the country if they start to replicate that kind of policy across the country?
I don't have the stats with me, Kevin, so this is just an opinion and an observation. But I think that there are so many participants in the private sector that has taken this up because it makes financial sense. That they've actually started to drive the legislation is just something that's been put in place, but the actual business case for diversion of food waste has actually made more sense than the actual legislation. But the legislation will kick in. From a private sector business point of view, I think that there's probably sufficient capacity to handle it. The question I'm asking is what's going to be the financial impact? Not only the financial, but maybe the logistics impact, everything around it once it truly kicks in. Because a lot of the composting facilities make their business cases based on two things. They attract the gate fee, and then they produce compost, and then they sell the compost. And my logic tells me that if you get this ban, and everybody starts taking their waste to composting facilities, there's going to be a oversupply of compost in the sector. Compost is not something that you can transport long distances. It needs to be used in close proximity. So I think that there is going to be an impact, but I'm not too overly concerned. There's also other alternatives like biogas, like the black soldier fly. There's definitely, in the Western Cape, I would say that we're probably best positioned. But then if you move to Gauteng and even KwaZulu-Natal, completely under, what's the word that we're looking for? Underserviced market. There should be, much more that can be done in that sector, especially if you think about they're running out of landfill. What's the first thing that you want to avoid is smelly, rotting food waste at your hotel or entertainment or hostel. So they should be leading the way in terms of diverting organic waste, because it's the easiest. And if you divert organic waste, then you can actually sometimes even wait 2 weeks before you collect your other waste. Just think about it. Food waste needs to be collected at least, at the longest, every 3 days. The collection costs 50% of your total waste management bill. If you separate the food waste, you can extend that 3-day collection for your other part of your waste to every second or even every third week. Just think about the saving that you get from that. Your food waste, yes, you need to still collect it if you're doing it off-site, or you get on-site solutions where you don't need to move that food waste ever. So you can get to zero waste to landfill with zero increase in cost. That's the ideal picture. But if you do things like we've just explained, separate food waste, and the logic and the operational ease that is then that comes afterwards actually shows that you can start saving money. That's actually what we help companies to realize, is exactly that. Is like, if you work smart, you can actually structure it in a way that you're increasing your diversion, but you're not increasing your costs.
So let's talk about the economics of this zero waste to landfill journey. We know about what the baseline is, which is sending everything to a landfill, and that can be anything across South Africa from 300 to 650 Rand a tonne to be disposed of. Then we obviously want to start sorting at source and recycling. In which case you have to pay people, there's logistics, you have to make sure that everything goes to the right place. There might be gate fees at the different alternatives, whether they are composting facilities, whether they're mechanical recycling facilities or the sort. All comes with extra costs, right? And then you've done everything you can, and for example, you got an office park and you're at 85% you've done best practice. You got 15%. How much can people expect to pay for that last 15%?
That's a moving target, Kevin. It's a moving target. I would say that depending on where you're based in South Africa, because there are alternatives and they are rapidly evolving. I'm rather going to give you the range, because I'm not going to sort of put myself out there. But I would say, and that's now including transport cost, because as you say, disposal 650. Please remember that 650 is just what they charge at the gate, and you're more likely going to pay 1,300 Rand a tonne, because it's about double, with the logistics. For that last 15%, I would say 5 to let's rather make it 4,000 to 8,000 Rand, between 4,000 and 8,000 Rand a tonne.
Okay, so it's a hockey stick.
Yeah.
All right. Obviously, recyclables, you get a rebate, right? There's something comes back to the company, or I know that you always talk about this. Actually, the people who are sorting the waste at a minimum wage should be incentivized by the rebates to actually give them more of an income so that they sort better, right? That doesn't happen in most companies, but we always recommend it to companies because we believe it's going to get the best environmental result and social result, actually. But for the most part, we remain in a labor exploitative environment for labor. But then there's whatever goes. I know that part of the service that we provide to our clients is this options matrix. Right, where we get to a point, and we've done it for a client, and I'm happy for you to talk about case studies that you're able to do that. But what are the alternatives? And I'm talking about just general waste now. I'm not talking about niche waste that we've asked to find. Have you got a solution for this waste stream or that waste stream? I'm talking about your generic type of general waste. Okay, coming from a mall, coming from an office, coming from a light industrial kind of facility. What are the options, right? And how available are they right now in the Western Cape? Firstly, because from our discussion and from our knowledge of market intelligence around the space, they're way ahead of the rest of the country. What's available right now? What's working? What's affordable? And yeah, if you can give us a bit of an idea about that, that would be great.
You're talking about that last 15%. The residual, we call it residual commercial waste.
You know what, even some of the plastic recycling stuff, okay, we know mechanical recycling, we know the pitfalls, we know that it's not a perfect solution because of the degradation of quality of plastics over time, you know, as it gets more recycled. Give us some ideas of the innovation that's out there, because I know you and I know that you're a very innovative engineer, and we've tested probably most things. Give us an idea of what's right now is a viable solution. That's a good alternative, but that also is not going to break the bank.
Okay, so let's take out of your waste, your glass is, and I love glass, because in my view this is 100% recyclable. You can take this glass and make a glass and another glass and another glass and another glass, over and over and over and over with the same sand that was used. So, and there's no leaching of chemicals or toxins or other nasties into your contents that you store in it. So it does have its downside. It's energy intensive, you know. So yes, it does emit quite a lot of CO2 because it is energy intensive. But it, you know, CO2 versus having something that contaminates the whole world, marine life. I think I read somewhere that, I don't know, by 2050 that we will have a certain percentage of our bodies will be made out of microplastics.
I think a certain amount of our bloodstream has already got microplastics.
Yes. Now, I'm more concerned about that than what I'm concerned about CO2. So sometimes I hate the only measuring of CO2.
There's trade-offs, right?
Because people measure something, and it's good to measure CO2, but are you making the correct decisions based on what you're measuring? So you're saying, but it's more environmentally friendly if I swap to plastics. Really? It's got a lower carbon footprint. Yes, that's what it's got. But is it more environmentally friendly? Absolutely not. You know, so it's dangerous to just measure one metric. It's a good thing that people measure it, but you need to use your common sense as well. You know, something that pollutes, contaminates.
Yeah,
everything.
It's toxic.
Yeah, kills marine animals. Anyways,
I love that example. And you know what? I have to bring up one of my favorite thinkers and philosophers, Thomas Sowell, who said there's no such thing as a good solution. There's only trade-offs.
Yeah, that's probably true.
Okay, and I think that's a great example, right? Because right here, right now, we are being contaminated by plastics. Our children are being contaminated. So what is worse? 3 generations' time, people potentially being impacted by climate, or right now the toxicity of things that are contaminating our children. Yeah. 100%. So I think that's a great example.
So yes, it's got a high carbon footprint, but it's 100% recyclable. Most metals are fully recyclable. You know, most metals. A lot of energy, but fully recyclable. But then you get your cardboard, which is in fact very similar in nature to plastics. It's a fiber, and that is what plastic is. It's a mimic of natural fibers made from petrochemicals. That's how plastics was formed. It's a fiber made out of petrochemicals. So fiber, every time you cut it, you make the fiber length shorter. And it's the fiber length that basically gives its characteristics. If you look at printer paper, I like to use this example. People say, if you look at printer paper, it's terrible to use as toilet paper. I've never done it, but I can tell you it won't work. Because it doesn't absorb water. You can chuck a glass of water, it will fall. Yes, it will sort of warp it, but so because the fiber lengths are long. Okay. What happens when you recycle it? So I print something, I put it in the recycle bin, it goes to the mill, it gets recycled. So what it does, it gets chopped up, and a new piece of paper gets made. That piece of paper has got shorter fiber lengths, but it's got what we call a lower quality. So it's not. It eventually goes down to newspaper. What happens if you pour a glass of water on a newspaper? The chain length is so short that it just grabs water. Now that's in some instances a good thing, like paper towel, which is a bad thing. We'll talk about it.
We're not using it to go to the toilet, though, the newspaper. But
but we need to talk about paper towel as well. It's shocking. And then eventually it ends up as toilet paper. And its characteristics is that the chain length is now so short that it tears easily. It absorbs a lot of moisture. That's the only thing that you can do with it, is to use it as toilet paper. And then after that, there's nothing that you can do with it.
So the same thing basically happens with plastic.
Same thing happens with plastic. So I don't like the word recycling because it tricks your mind in thinking that I can make a like for like. Glass, absolutely. Metal, almost. Paper, no way. You can't take paper and continue to make the same quality of paper, and then plastic's the same thing. So I like to call it downgrading, because that's literally what you're doing. Every time you put it through a heat cycle, you shorten the polymer length. Yeah, the polymer length is the equivalent to fiber length. And interestingly enough, there was a study done that was published last year. I think I sent that to you, where they indicated that most plastics in the world does not get mechanically recycled more than once. Most, I think it was 90% of plastics do not get mechanically recycled more than once. So it's shocking. So people, everybody buys plastic bottles, etc., and throw it into recycle, thinking that they're doing their part. But if you go behind the scenes, you realize that thing actually only gets used once, and then after that it's not economically recyclable anymore. It doesn't have the strength. And yes, there we sit with our plastic bottles.
So this bottle is probably 90% virgin plastic and 10% recyclable plastic. Would it be something like that?
Yeah, I think in some instances it goes up as high as 30%.
30% recycled, 70% virgin. But you'll never do away with virgin plastic. It's just impossible when you mechanically recycle it.
They are aiming to get it better and better, but that's the reality. The reality is that it is there. So we're just pumping more plastic and more plastic into the system, which is basically poisoning our whole ecosystem. Yes. So what is the alternatives? What is the solutions? So on the one hand, stop plastic. And I'm, when I read these advocates for stopping plastic, my first response is, but we can't get rid of it. It's almost, we're so entrenched with plastic, but I think they've, in some cases they're absolutely right. The only way to stop it is to stop it completely. It's like alcoholic, I'll just drink less. You have to cut it off and say no more, but it's got so many beneficial uses, especially in healthcare. Can you imagine what healthcare will look like without plastic. It's insane. So now you're talking about, okay, stop plastic, but there's more people that's going to live a terrible life because of health. It's a very difficult thing. The other thing is it's a lot of advances, although there's quite a strong opposition to it, but chemical recycling. So basically what chemical recycling entails is plastic was made from oil. So what they then do is they heat up the plastic to decompose back into a gas, and that gas is cooled down and forms the oil again. At a specific temperature, you can control it, so it makes the oil again, and that oil can then be used to produce plastic again. And plastic of the same grade and quality. Look, there are going to be contaminants in the oil, and that needs to be cleaned, but technically, and I'm talking technically, it can become virgin plastic again.
Yeah.
So if you advance the technology, sufficient, you can actually take plastic, convert it back into virgin plastic. Yes, there's losses along the way. You probably only end up with 80% after every chemical recycling step. You lose 20% in gases that you use for the process to drive it. But it is something that, because I think plastic, in some instances, it's got a fantastic capability and characteristic. I think we're overutilizing it because it's so useful.
And reasonably inexpensive.
Reasonably inexpensive, but I think we need to find a balance. Where do we need to use it? And if we are going to use it, let's make sure that it doesn't pollute our ecosystem. And one of the solutions is chemical recycling. Then we've got the work that the guys from Costa Rica, CRDC did, where they just take all types of plastic that's even difficult to recycle chemically, and they convert it into a aggregate.
Building material.
Yeah, building material.
They call it tragic plastic. What do they call it?
Tragic plastic, yeah. Tragic plastic is some plastic that ends up in the ecosystem, environment.
It's a fantastic solution, and we've been working with them, haven't we, at the VNA, and there's been some interesting stuff going on.
Yeah, we did we were involved in the casting of the foundation of the Oranje Sicht market. Then that foundation had Resonate, which is the trademark name of, so it's plastic. And if I recall correctly, we involved a community project where the plastic was collected from communities and giving those communities food in exchange for plastic that they picked up. And that plastic then was offset from natural aggregate that was dug out of a quarry and putting it in there.
In South Africa, where so much of society is dependent on the identifying, picking waste to be able to create their own livelihoods, right? Unfortunately, we've got to that point where the only part of society that sees value in waste are the ones that are really the most undermined and compromised because they rely on it for their livelihoods every day. How much of the stuff that we do to be able to drive environmental sustainability is creating this sort of negative trade-off for society in South Africa? And do you think there's a way of integrating this informal sector in our society, the waste pickers, the informal waste picker sector, into the formal waste management sector in South Africa?
Absolutely. I think that is probably one of the biggest opportunities to make a step change in the waste management industry as a whole, is giving the informal sector a way and means to get access to that waste. If you had to, I tell people, go and, if you want to know which waste is valuable, go and have a look at the guy pushing his trolley down the street in the morning when you put out your garbage. They will only pick the waste that is valuable. Everything else is wrongly designed by these packaging companies because it doesn't have intrinsic value. So we can actually learn more about the waste from a waste picker than we could probably learn from somebody in university that studied a degree in design of packaging, because they will tell you what has got value and what doesn't have value. I think that they're using technology, using data systems, possibly also AI, allows us the opportunity to empower a sector that has, probably the largest portion of our unemployed population to actually start beneficiating these waste streams. Definitely an opportunity. Not something that will be able to solve overnight, but if you actually create a system where you can bring the knowledge of cutting-edge solutions with the efficientness of the informal sector and bring them together, I think it will revolutionize the industry.
So what role do waste management companies play? Because often with our clients, we're dealing with decarbonization, we're dealing with implementing sustainability strategies, social, environmental, governance, etc. And then there's this waste thing that we speak about, and we tell them about the business continuity risk that could be exposed to. We tell them about the rising costs of waste management. And we tell them that it would be in their best interest to embark on a journey towards zero waste to landfill. And then they say, well, no, our waste management company should be doing that for us. Okay, are waste management companies doing this for their clients? Is it in their best interest to do that? And are they doing it in a way that is not exposing their clients to those extra costs that you speak about? Or is it something that they're just not going to get to because the know-how and the capability is not there?
I wish I could say yes. I wish I could say yes, that is what waste management companies are doing for their clients, but unfortunately, it's probably the opposite. I'm not, what's the word that we generalizing this? Yes, there are examples of where companies are helping their clients to get to zero waste to landfill. Typically, those are waste management companies that don't own any landfills. So they've got no feeding of the cow, as they say, the one that makes the cash. So they don't send in volume. So typically it's those companies, and they're trying to minimize logistics. So they don't typically have a large logistics fleet, because those are assets that needs a certain return on investment and utilization in order to make money. So they typically make their money on trading of recyclables. They make their money on a percentage of labor. So they're working towards this. But typically what I see is that even the best waste management companies out there are caught up in the daily operational focus of making this system work, that they lose sight of what is necessary to stay on top of cutting edge of waste alternatives. But on the other side is companies use their clients and telling them, we will solve this. 3 years later, when the contract needs to be renegotiated, it's the same story. I've got an interesting example where I had proposals, and I worked as an alternative manager and came up with solutions for a client for waste streams, and that solution would be put on the table during contract negotiation, And then I would sit there and tell the client these fantastic things that I'm going to do for them. And then a week after we, the meeting, that proposal will just be shelved in the drawer. Say, no, we'll look at it later. And then that gets pulled out 3 years later. So that's, I got so frustrated. That's why I went into what I'm doing now, is to help companies do that. So companies that typically own landfills, that typically own large logistics fleets, they are there to serve. Their primary purpose is to do that, and they will tell their clients that they will do it, but just go and have a look at the results. So if they will solve it, why haven't they done that? And that's the question that you need to ask yourself.
A company wants to embark on a journey of zero waste to landfill. What does the roadmap look like? Okay, what are the milestones and what are the parts of the process? If you can just run through those towards, and it's another thing that I know that we're offering our clients is this independently certified zero waste to landfill. Tell me about the process to get there, and tell me a little bit more about that as well. If you can just run through that, that would be really great.
Okay. Kevin, I like to use this analogy. It is if I had to go to the doctor or and say, I want to become a professional athlete, what would I first do? They would go and do an assessment on me. That's typically what we do for a client. We do a current state assessment. Is where are you? Are you overweight? Are you a smoker? Do you have heart problems? All that. Just check you out on what is your current position, and that's what we do for clients, is a current state assessment. And then linked to that is we do a waste characterization, where we actually sit there and almost with a tweezer separate all the waste that's generated into different categories, and we weigh it, we measure it, and we can actually give a report and say, if we only separate at source, and if we only do a sorting properly, you can get to X percentage. Then what we do is there's almost like a standard exercise program now for this athlete. We've got the standard operating procedures that we give you. So this is what you need to do. And then it's almost like, okay, but you need somebody to help you do this. And we've got a contractor alignment process, which we give to you. And it's, what we've now learned is it's actually more complex. Probably the most important thing to do is we give you the guidelines, but what we're seeing is still with the guidelines, the companies don't know how to apply those guidelines properly. So we actually help you in appointing the correct service provider, because what we've seen is that we are able to save companies a significant amount of money if we are able to tell the waste company exactly what they need to quote on. And if we can show the client, hang on, these are unnecessary and inefficient methods. And if we bring the two together, what we typically see is that we can increase the waste diversion and not increase the cost.
So what you're saying is basically getting involved in the procurement of waste management services. Clients could expect a return on investment on the fees that they pay you for an ongoing period.
What we've seen is our average 12 months payback.
Plus,
that's significant.
Plus, not only the cost benefit, but also best practice waste management that's actually going to get you on a path to zero waste to landfill.
No, absolutely. And then what we do is then we've got that last mile, the alternative. So now that we've minimized it to the absolute, the least amount of waste, we then look at alternatives, tying in with existing facilities, teaming up with other industries to try and absorb that amount to have the least amount of impact. And then what we do is we actually help implement it along. So we almost project manage the whole process. And then at the end, for 12 months, we are at a position where we can certify, and we accredited professional with the Green Building Council, and proud to say that we've done the most certifications in South Africa, and we like to keep it that way. But so that is the whole process. It's a 7-step process.
And we've been through this process quite a few times. I know one of your clients, a pretty big one, the V&A Waterfront. We can talk about that. We went through this process. We went through the strategy and gave them a whole lot of high-level financial feasibility studies in terms of what they could do. They went with one option, which is actually now under construction.
We're actually doing the kickoff with the engineers on site, starting to have a look at all the battery limits, etc. But yes, it's now a reality. The project is moving forward. Probably about 18, 20 months before it would be operational. But yes, yeah, it's been a long journey, but we're there now.
And the options that they went with was a swallow or advanced thermal solution that is not an incinerator. It's more environmentally friendly, but it's a pyrolysis gasification type of solution that will turn the municipal solid waste into electricity.
Yes, but what we also learned down the road with various testings is that we had to avoid as much as possible food waste. It's not a swallow-all. So what we realized is don't put in food waste. It's not as easy. So it comes back to all the principles actually stay intact.
Yeah.
Source separation, nutrient or food waste treatment on its own, and then energy recovery is a method, and I think it's one of the most efficient methods at the moment.
I have a question from someone in the audience who sent me a question asking me about, okay, well, why can't we do away with petrochemical plastics, okay, and not just introduce plastics that are made from a plant resin, which was quite a big thing. There was a drive in South Africa. Why is that not happening, Hein? I mean, I sort of know the answer to that, but I mean, in South African context, it would be very, very detrimental to what's going on because it's a different material entirely. But what is your view on that?
It's about that polymer chain length. If you remember, every time you recycle it, it becomes shorter, and the shorter it becomes, the structural strength basically degrades. Now, if you take a natural product that biodegrades on itself, and that plastic is not easily identifiable in the plastic management system. So now that plastic bag that's biodegradable finds its way into the plastic recycling system. That as it's melted, it will mix into this. Now that chain length starts decomposing, and you literally got a product, and over time, and it's not a long time, those chain lengths will shorten by itself. So you will have a product that's got no structural integrity. So suddenly you don't know what you're going to get. It might just break into pieces 2 weeks after you've purchased it. So it's actually a big problem. So either you have to go completely natural, but then also there are natural products, and then there's products that is marketed as natural, and it's actually just a product that is got chemical properties, but it's got plant in there as well. So it only breaks it into microplastics, which is actually worse.
So it's either you have to ban all petrochemical plastics and introduce one particular specification of plant plastic, or you just can't do both.
I think my view, reuse. The good old-fashioned, my grandparents and my parents, good old-fashioned glass jars, reusable packaging, bags that was made out of cotton. Reuse as much as possible. Don't think that, I buy convenience and throw away and it doesn't have an impact. It's got a major impact. You don't know what the impact is. And that's, I think, coming back to, behavioral change, or not coming back to it, but actually touching on that, because, I wanted to touch on that, is that we need to make people aware of the impact. As I said, glass versus plastic. Many people just throw the bottle and say, but I'm recycling it. No, you don't know what happens to that bottle that you think is being recycled. It's only going to go there once, and then it's going to end up in your bloodstream, literally. So once you make people aware of why you need to separate at source and why you need to recycle and why, then you will get the buy-in and you will automatically start getting a behavior shift. By telling people they have to do something and I don't understand it. Excellent example of this is, you will remember it. We went to a well-known client that asked us to come and have a look to see whether we can help them improve, and then also because they were struggling they've put all the effort in financially to get them to zero waste to landfill. They actually wanted to be certified, but they just couldn't get there. And we were doing the site visits, and they had invested in this really state-of-the-art recycling system. And while we were there with their representative, a cleaner came with a black bag full of mixed waste and walked straight in front of us, lift up the recycling pot and threw in the mixed waste, that's contaminated, which basically contaminates everything. But that's ironically, if the behavior change starts with, in my view, the awareness. Making them aware, why do we need to keep them separate? Because then the next time he doesn't understand why it should go in that. We've just had the same example coming to this podcast. Correct. There's a bin with obvious only plastics in there. We had a bag of contaminated food waste. And the guy says, no, just throw it in there.
That's right.
I want to talk about paper towel. It is really convenient, very similar to toilet paper, but it ends up not being flushed down the drain where it further decomposes. It now ends up in your general waste. Now, we did a study for a large client where we looked at the volume of waste, and they had it's significant volumes. I'm talking about 300,000 tons of waste per annum, in excess of that. Their paper towel waste made up more than 10% of their total waste. And I always remember this thing, telling my kids, what weighs more, a kilogram of feathers or a kilogram of lead? No, they weigh the same. So when I'm talking about 10%, I'm talking about weight. Can you imagine how much paper towel that is? It is significant. And we did the study, and it's more environmentally friendly not to use paper at all. So from a carbon emissions point of view, it's better to use hand dryers.
Interesting.
Yeah, the biggest single impact that they could make was just divert, getting us, not using paper towel from the start, because people use paper towel and they always use more than they should. You don't want your hands wet, so what do? You just pull 2 or 3 times more than what you should be using.
So, I mean, this is a complex subject, and we know that. That's probably what draws us to it, right? Because it's not simple. It's the different characteristics or characterizations of waste, the sheer number of elements that need to come together in order to create the processes towards a more sustainable solution. We haven't even spoken about all the waste streams. There's e-waste, there's human effluent waste, there's wet waste, the fat trap waste, there's healthcare risk waste, and we deal in all of it, right? I suppose the question is if we're going to move from where we are right now, current state, where it's quite simple, well, we've oversimplified it because we just throw everything in a hole, to a point where everything needs to go in the different directions towards different destinations. It's a massive transformational change management exercise, right? I mean, you mentioned standard operating procedures. This is one element of it. How do we get everyone to fly in formation? How do we get everyone in this roadmap that we're developing to consistently ensure with a chain of custody that everything's going from where it's coming from to a destination that we want it to go to in a way that is traceable, is measurable. And then the other thing we haven't spoken about is the data around all of the stuff, but we'll come to that now.
Yeah. Well, I think, while you were saying that, that's the thing that I was thinking about, is the certification really is helping in that way, is that in order to certify, we need to get all of the information in a certain way, a certain format. And that's the biggest challenge at the moment, is getting all the information in the right format. It's a huge task. But as we're now chipping away at it, and more certifications is coming to the fore, companies are starting to change their collection systems of data, their reporting systems of data, so that they can be in line with the certification system. So I think from that perspective, it will filter downstream, and I truly believe that you won't get certification if you don't do what we sort of prescribed in the standard operating procedures. So so the more certifications that we're doing, and we're on a big drive to get as many certifications over the line, especially in 2025, is to make people aware, so that it becomes a almost aspiration of other companies, and then everything will start falling into place, and we can actually then set them up in the most efficient way that there is. And because everybody started doing what they thought was best practice. Yeah. But now we've learned over the years, this is the best way of doing it.
I have another question from someone in the audience who's speaking about extended producer responsibility, which has now become a compliance thing in South Africa. So for those of you who don't know, for up until recently, a couple of years ago, the responsibility for the safe and sustainable disposal of waste lay with the consumer of that waste, right? That whole thing has switched around now to that responsibility now being shifted to the producer of that waste, meaning brand owners, manufacturers, retailers with their private brands, etc., which speaks to the waste hierarchy, right? One is to avoid waste in the first place, which means reduce your packaging, and that will ultimately not become waste, right? This is something that's it's now focused on the plastics industry, and it's also focused on the e-waste industry, correct? So this is something that we're very involved in at GCX. We've got data systems that have been developed to deal with that, if anyone's interested. But I think the question that's come from the audience is what actually can be done by consumers to actually influence the situation. We are consuming waste and packaging from brands every single day. What can we actually do you think, as consumers, to be able to shift to move the needle on more sustainable waste management?
I think I think consumers need to understand that their purchases are monitored precisely. The companies that they are buying from knows exactly what their spending patterns are, what they're buying, what they prefer, what they don't prefer. So in order to get your supermarket or company that you buy from to become more sustainable, is one, do more sustainable purchases. Go for the fresh produce that is unpackaged, and if everybody starts buying that, the other stuff that is actually more expensive but more convenient, that's got this, those are the things that's got the packaging in. It's more convenience, but it's also more expensive. So they know that we as a human race are willing to pay for something that's more unsustainable but more convenient. Although I'm not really into social media at all, but I think the power of social media, if consumers start to say, but why this, why that, those companies will definitely react. They have to. The company, what I want to say, so that your buying power, they will see that the consumer wants something different. So you actually have to guide them. They're just reading the data. And the data currently tells them, we're lazy, we want convenience, and we don't care about how much plastic packaging That's what the data is telling them, and it's like the algorithm in YouTube. It will only give you what you are asking for it, and their data tells them that's what they're doing. If their data tells them the opposite, they will respond in that way.
And I think the other thing that Matthew always brings up is, just take it away. What does away mean? I think people need to understand what away means.
It's not.
Okay, and I think that's where a lot of it comes from there, but take it away means it's not out of sight, out of mind. It's going somewhere, and there's a consequence to where it's going. Hein Fourie, we've been in business for 11 years. Sure. Okay, yes, to the next 11 years. I've thoroughly enjoyed every moment. I've learned a huge amount. I thoroughly enjoy your mind, the innovation in your team, and I think the strategic collaboration between our companies is priceless, and I'm looking forward to doing a lot more of this good work with more of our clients. So thank you.